Her engagement was broken and she impulsively married a poor man, unaware he was a hidden millionaire. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The gray sky hung low over the small college town in Texas. Rain tapped softly on the windows of a narrow diner where Mark Davis sat alone at a corner table, staring at the engagement ring that no longer meant anything. Just 3 hours ago, he had been standing in a chapel, waiting for a future that had vanished. His fiancée had left him at the altar, taking with her not only his heart but also his last piece of pride. At 23 years old, Mark was a law student working part-time at a grocery store to support his sick mother and younger sister. Life had never been kind to him, but today felt like the cruelest joke yet. His phone buzzed again. Another message from his best friend. "Mark, come home. It is not worth it." He silenced the phone and looked outside instead. The rain blurred the world into a watercolor of headlights and reflections. Across the street, a woman in an elegant white dress stumbled out of a car. The veil tangled in her hair told him everything. Someone else's wedding had just collapsed too. She stood beneath the awning of the bus stop. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, clutching a bouquet like it might still save her. For a long moment, Mark just watched, recognizing the same kind of heartbreak that mirrored his own. When thunder rolled over the rooftops, he grabbed his jacket and stepped into the rain. The air was cold and sharp. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked. She laughed bitterly through her tears. "Do I look all right? I just lost my entire life in one afternoon." He hesitated, rain dripping from his hair. "I lost mine too." Their eyes met two strangers, both broken, both standing in the wreckage of something they once believed in. She exhaled a shaky breath. "So what do people like us do now?" Mark looked down at the ring still in his palm, then back at her. Something wild, reckless, almost impossible crossed his mind. "Then maybe we start over, together." She blinked. "What do you mean?" He took a small step closer, the rain soaking through his shirt. "If you just need someone who will not leave, marry me, right now." The words hung in the air like thunder before the storm. For a second she thought he was joking, but his face was calm, steady, almost serene. "You do not even know my name," she whispered. "I do not need to," he said softly. "I just know you are standing here in the rain, and you deserve better than being alone." Lightning flashed across the sky. She stared at him, this soaked, exhausted young man, with eyes too honest for his own good, and something inside her broke loose. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was fate. "All right," she said finally, voice trembling. "Let us get married." He blinked, almost disbelieving his own ears. "You mean it?" She nodded once, her lips curving into a fragile, desperate smile. "Why not? We both have nothing left to lose." They stood there under the storm, two strangers about to make the most impulsive decision of their lives. And somewhere between the thunder and the rain, the story of their fake marriage and their very real destiny began. The rain had finally stopped by the time Mark and the mysterious bride found themselves standing in front of a quiet courthouse on the edge of town. The lights glowed faintly through the tall windows, reflecting on puddles that shimmered like broken glass. It was late, long past closing hours, yet fate seemed determined to give them one last chance to do something reckless. Inside, the night clerk looked up from his desk, startled by the sight of the drenched couple. "Can I help you?" he asked, glancing from Mark's soaked shirt to the woman's torn veil. Mark cleared his throat. "We would like to get married." The clerk blinked, confused. "Now?" The woman beside him, her name, he had finally learned, was Claire, nodded without hesitation. "Yes. Tonight." There was a long pause, the kind that weighs between disbelief and sympathy. The clerk sighed softly. "You are aware that this is a legal contract?" Claire met Mark's eyes, her voice trembling but certain. "We are." 10 minutes later, under the harsh fluorescent light of an empty office, they signed the papers. No flowers, no music, no guests. Just two strangers, two signatures, and a silence that felt heavier than the rain. When the clerk stamped the certificate, Claire whispered a faint, nervous laugh. "So, I guess that makes me Mrs. Davis. Mark smiled weakly. It seems so. They left the courthouse hand in hand, both aware that the gesture was more awkward than romantic. The storm clouds were thinning, leaving the air cold and still. Claire shivered in her thin dress, and without thinking, Mark slipped off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. "Thank you," she murmured. He shrugged. "I could not let you freeze, not after a wedding." She gave him a look halfway between gratitude and disbelief. "You really did not think this through, did you?" "Not even a little," he admitted, and for the first time that night, she smiled. The cab ride to Mark's small apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the tires on wet pavement. The driver kept glancing at them through the mirror, probably wondering what kind of love story began like this. Neither of them offered an explanation. When they arrived, Claire hesitated at the door. The building was old, the hallway dimly lit, the smell of fresh paint mixed with damp air. Mark unlocked the door to a modest one-bedroom apartment. The living room doubled as a study, law books stacked against the wall, a single desk lamp glowing over a pile of handwritten notes. "I am sorry," he said. "It is not much." She stepped inside slowly, her heels clicking against the floor. "It is more than I expected." He handed her a towel. "You can take the bed. I will sleep on the couch." Her brows lifted. "You are serious?" He nodded. "I said I would not let you be alone. That does not mean anything else." "Oh." She studied him for a moment, trying to decide whether to believe him. His sincerity disarmed her. There was no arrogance, no ulterior motive, just quiet decency, the kind that was almost foreign to her world. As she changed into one of his spare shirts, Claire glanced around. A photograph on the shelf caught her eye. Mark with a smiling older woman and a teenage girl. His mother and sister, she guessed. The sight made her chest tighten in an unfamiliar way. When she returned to the living room, Mark had fallen asleep on the couch, one arm hanging over the edge, exhaustion written across his face. The sound of the ticking clock filled the silence between them. For the first time in years, Claire felt something close to peace. It was strange, almost frightening, how safe she felt in a stranger's home. At dawn, she woke to the smell of coffee. Mark was already dressed, his tie slightly crooked, flipping through a stack of legal papers at the table. "You do not have to stay," he said gently, without looking up. "If you want to go back to your life, I will not stop you." She poured herself a cup, her eyes lingering on him. "My life ended yesterday. Maybe it is time to build a new one." He finally met her gaze, something soft flickering in his eyes. "Then maybe we start with breakfast." Outside, the city stirred to life again. The morning light filtered through the window, catching the simple gold band on her finger. It glimmered faintly, a quiet promise of a future neither of them could yet imagine. Somewhere deep down, Claire wondered what kind of man agreed to marry a stranger, just to help her stand again. What she did not know, what no one knew, was that Mark Davis was not the man he appeared to be. And soon, that truth would change everything. 3 days passed before either of them mentioned what had happened. The marriage certificate sat folded on the kitchen counter, proof of a decision that still felt unreal. Claire tried to convince herself it was temporary, a strange act of rebellion that would fade like the bruises on her heart. Yet every morning she woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Mark reading case notes aloud to himself, and each time, the world felt a little less broken. Mark kept his word. He never asked questions about her past, never crossed a line. He went to classes during the day, worked evenings at a small grocery store, and came home late, quietly placing a few bills in a jar labeled Mom's Treatment. Claire noticed it one night and hesitated before asking, "You take care of your mother alone?" He nodded. "She has a heart condition. My sister is still in high school. They live in San Antonio. I send what I can." There was no self-pity in his voice, only calm persistence. It unsettled her. The men in her world usually hid behind wealth, charm, or arrogance. Mark had none of those shields, only a quiet dignity that felt far more dangerous to her carefully guarded heart. By the end of the week, she decided to help. She cleaned the apartment, fixed a wobbly table leg, even cooked dinner for the first time in years. When Mark came home and found her standing in the kitchen wearing one of his shirts, stirring soup, he froze in the doorway. "You did not have to do this," he said softly. "I wanted to," she replied. "You saved me from making a fool of myself. I owe you at least one meal." He smiled then, a small, honest smile that reached his eyes. They ate quietly, trading awkward conversation that soon turned into laughter. For the first time since their impulsive wedding, it almost felt like home. But reality waited just beyond the walls of the tiny apartment. Claire's phone began buzzing again, messages from friends, reporters, even her ex-fiancé. The scandal of her disappearance was everywhere online. One headline read, "Runaway bride found? Sources say heiress vanished after public breakup." Mark saw the worry on her face one morning and asked, "Are they looking for you?" "Yes," she admitted. "They will not stop until they find me." He set down his coffee. "You can stay here as long as you need. No questions, no judgments." Or, something inside her softened. "Why are you so kind to me?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because I know what it feels like to be judged before anyone knows your story." That night, she could not sleep. She stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker like stars that had fallen too close. A thought crept into her mind. Who exactly was Mark Davis? For someone struggling through school and part-time work, he seemed far too composed. There was a steadiness in him that did not belong to someone ordinary. But when she asked him about his father the next day, he simply said, "He passed away when I was 17. He taught me to keep my promises." Claire let it go, though the curiosity stayed. A few days later, Mark came home holding a thin envelope. "We need to make this official," he said. Inside was a small contract he had typed out. It listed simple terms. They would live together for 90 days, maintain the appearance of a real marriage for her protection, and part ways afterward with no claims or expectations. Claire read the words carefully. "You really thought of everything." He hesitated. "It just feels right to set boundaries. Neither of us planned this." She signed without protest. "Then it is settled. 90 days of pretending." He met her gaze. "Or 90 days to find out who we really are." Later that evening, she watched him repair a broken lamp, sleeves rolled up, focus unwavering. His hands were calloused, yet his movements were precise, too precise for a man who claimed to have grown up struggling. Something did not add up. But before she could question him again, he looked up and caught her staring. "What?" he asked. She shook her head quickly. "Nothing. I was just thinking you look like someone who should be giving orders, not following them." Mark laughed softly. "Trust me, no one listens to me enough for that." Still, her instincts whispered otherwise. There was a calm authority in his voice, a subtle command in the way he carried himself. It was as if he belonged to another life entirely. As the days turned into weeks, the boundaries between fake and real began to blur. She started looking forward to his quiet jokes, to the way he always left her the last cup of coffee, to how he made sure the door was locked before he left. And every night, before she fell asleep, Claire would glance at the simple gold band on her finger and wonder if the universe had made a mistake or a promise. Neither of them knew that beyond the quiet streets of their small Texas town, a private investigator had just tracked down their marriage license. By morning, Claire's name, and the name of her unexpected husband, would be on every major news feed in the state. And when her world came crashing back into theirs, the truth about who Mark Davis really was would begin to surface. By the next morning, everything changed. Claire woke to the sound of her phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. Headlines flashed across the screen. "Runaway bride found living with unknown man." Beneath it was a photo taken through their apartment window, the two of them having breakfast, smiling. Her stomach dropped. "Mark," she whispered, "they found us." He read the headline over her shoulder, calm but serious. "Do you want to tell your family?" She shook her head. "No. They would never understand." Within hours, reporters surrounded the building. The noise outside grew unbearable. Camera flashes through the curtains, shouted questions echoing off the walls. Mark stepped to the window, his jaw tightening. "We cannot stay here," he said. "Pack a bag." Oh. They slipped out the back door through the alley, rain soaking the pavement again, as if the city itself wanted to hide them. He led her toward an old truck parked near the grocery store where he worked. "Get in," he said quietly. They drove for an hour until the skyline faded into open road and endless fields. Finally, when the noise was far behind them, Claire spoke. "You are taking this too easily. Why are you not panicking like me?" Mark kept his eyes on the road. Because I have been chased before, not by reporters, but by expectations. She turned toward him. What does that mean? He smiled faintly. It means some people think they know me. They never do. They arrived at a small cabin near a lake, quiet, remote, surrounded by pine trees. The place looked abandoned, but inside it was clean and warm. Mark lit the fireplace and handed her a blanket. We can stay here until the noise dies down, he said. Claire sank into the couch, exhausted. You had this place ready? It belonged to my father, he said. I kept it for when I needed to think. The firelight flickered across his face, highlighting the steady calm that both comforted and unnerved her. For the first time, she wondered what else he was keeping hidden behind those steady eyes. Over the next few days, a fragile routine formed again. They cooked simple meals, read old books left on the shelves, and took walks by the lake at sunset. She began to laugh more easily, and he began to smile without guarding himself. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Claire said softly, "If this were a real marriage, it would not be so bad." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Maybe it is more real than we think. Her breath caught. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, suddenly, his phone buzzed on the table. He ignored it, but the name flashing on the screen caught her eye. Anderson and Pierce Legal Group. "Mark," she asked slowly, "why is a law firm calling you?" He hesitated, then turned off the phone. "It is nothing important," but the look in his eyes said otherwise. That night, Claire lay awake, listening to the soft crackle of the fire. Something in her chest tightened, a mix of fear and curiosity. She wanted to trust him, but the world she came from had taught her that secrets always demanded a price. At dawn, Mark stepped outside to make a call. She watched him through the window, his voice low and steady, words carried away by the wind. She could not hear what he said, only that the man who claimed to be ordinary spoke with the quiet authority of someone who was anything but. As he hung up, he looked toward the lake, unaware that Claire was watching. The reflection of the rising sun lit his face like truth breaking through the fog. And in that moment, Claire knew for certain Mark Davis was hiding far more than his kindness. He was hiding a life she was never meant to discover. The next morning, the calm around the lake shattered. Mark had gone into town to buy groceries, leaving Claire alone in the cabin. She was folding blankets when a knock echoed through the door. At first, she thought it was him, but when she opened it, two strangers in formal suits stood outside. "Mrs. Davis?" one of them asked politely. "We represent the Carter Holdings legal team." "We would like a word with your husband." Claire froze. "Carter Holdings? I think you have the wrong person." The older man smiled faintly. "I assure you, we do not. Tell Mr. Davis that the board has been waiting for his response." Before she could ask another question, they handed her a sealed envelope and walked away, their car tires crunching over the gravel as they disappeared down the narrow road. Her hands trembled as she stared at the gold-embossed letterhead. The name printed on the front made her breath stop. To Grant Carter Davis. She whispered the name aloud, trying to make sense of it. Grant Carter, she knew that name. The Carter family owned one of the largest technology companies in the state. Every business magazine had once written about the mysterious heir who disappeared years ago. Could it be possible? When Mark returned, she was waiting for him by the fireplace, the letter on the table. "You want to tell me what this is?" she asked. He froze in the doorway, the grocery bag slipping from his hand. The look in his eyes told her everything before he even spoke. "I was going to tell you," he said quietly. "Just not like this." Claire's voice shook. "Tell me what exactly? That the man I married is not a poor law student but the heir to a billion-dollar company?" He stepped closer, his tone calm but heavy. "I left that life. I walked away after my father's death. They wanted to control everything who I married, what I built, even what I believed in. I wanted something real. She stared at him, disbelief and hurt colliding inside her chest. "So you pretended to be poor? You let me think you were struggling, just like me?" "I never lied about who I am," he said. "I only left out what I used to be. When I met you, I wanted you to see me. Not the money." Her eyes filled with tears. "You think that makes it better? You have been lying by omission since the day we met." Mark's voice cracked. "Claire, I swear, what we have, whatever this has become, it is real." "Oh?" She shook her head, backing away. "No, It was convenient. I was broken, and you needed an escape. That is not love. For the first time since she had met him, Mark looked unsteady. Then what do you want me to do? I want the truth, she said softly. All of it. He lowered his gaze, silent for a long time. The truth is, I never meant to fall in love with you, but I did, and I will not let my past take that from us. Claire turned away, tears sliding down her cheeks. It already has. Bauer. She grabbed her coat and stepped outside into the cold morning air. The lake shimmered beneath a pale sky, quiet and endless. Behind her, Mark's voice called out once, but she did not stop. The sound of her footsteps faded into the woods, leaving only the echo of everything unsaid between them. Back inside, Mark sank into the chair by the fire, the unopened envelope still lying on the table. The flames flickered across the gold seal, the name Carter shining like a ghost he could no longer outrun. Outside, Claire kept walking until the cabin disappeared behind the trees. She did not know where she was going, only that she needed distance from the man she had started to love, and from the truth that had turned their fragile peace into a storm she could not yet face. The sun had already dipped behind the trees when Claire finally stopped walking. Her shoes were soaked, her hands trembling from the cold. She found a small bench near the lake, the same spot where they had watched the sunset together only a day earlier. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt familiar anymore. She stared at the water, her reflection trembling with every ripple. The truth replayed in her mind again and again. Grant Carter Davis. The name sounded like a stranger's, yet it belonged to the man who had cooked for her, made her laugh, and held her when she cried. It hurt to realize that every simple moment they had shared was built on a secret she was never meant to uncover. By the time she returned to the cabin, the fire had burned low. Mark Grant was sitting in the dim light, the letter finally opened in his hands. He looked up when she entered, his eyes weary but calm. "You came back," he said quietly. "I needed answers," she replied. He nodded, setting the letter aside. "Then you should have them." He stood, walking toward her slowly. "My father built Carter Technologies from nothing. When he passed away, the board expected me to take over. I tried, for a while. But the company changed. Greed replaced purpose. When I refused to sign a merger that would lay off thousands of workers, they turned against me. I walked away from all of it, sold my shares, left the name behind, and started over as Mark Davis." Claire listened in silence, her heart torn between understanding and disbelief. "And you thought disappearing would fix it?" "It was not about fixing," he said. "It was about surviving. I wanted to remember what life felt like before everything was about profit and headlines." Her voice softened. "So I was part of your escape?" He shook his head. "No, you were the only thing that ever felt real after I left that world." For a moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled softly between them, throwing long shadows across the wooden floor. Claire felt her anger waver, replaced by something she could not name, something closer to sorrow than rage. "Do you think hiding from who you are makes you a better man?" she asked. Grant met her gaze. "No, but being with you made me want to be one." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I do not know if I can forgive you." "I do not expect you to," he said, "but I will not stop trying." She turned toward the window, watching the snow begin to fall. The world outside looked peaceful, untouched by their chaos. "You know, when we first met, I thought you were saving me. Maybe we were saving each other." He smiled faintly. "Maybe we still can." Claire exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing for the first time all day. She looked back at him, his face illuminated by the flicker of the fire, so different from the man she thought she knew, yet still the same in all the ways that mattered. "You should tell the truth, Grant," she said finally. "To the board, to the press, to everyone. You cannot keep running forever." He nodded. "I will, but not because they demand it. Because you do." That night, she fell asleep on the couch, exhausted. Grant covered her with a blanket and sat quietly beside her, staring into the fire. The letter from the board lay open on the table, a summons to return, to reclaim the empire he had abandoned. Outside, the snow thickened, blanketing the cabin in white. For the first time in years, Grant Davis, once Grant Carter, knew exactly what he needed to do. The truth could no longer stay hidden, not from the world, and not from the woman who had unknowingly changed everything. The next morning, Grant woke before dawn. The fire had gone out, and the cabin was cold, but his mind was clear for the first time in years. Claire was still asleep on the couch, her hair spilling over the pillow, her breathing soft and steady. For a moment, he simply watched her, remembering the strange twist of fate that had brought her into his life. He had spent so many years running from who he was, only to discover the truth in the eyes of someone who never asked for anything but honesty. He packed a small bag and wrote a note on the table before leaving quietly. The road to the city stretched ahead, wet with melting snow, the sky turning from gray to gold. As he drove, he rehearsed the words he had avoided for too long. It was time to face the people who had turned his name into a weapon. At Carter Technologies headquarters, the marble lobby gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Security guards recognized him instantly, though he had not set foot there in nearly 3 years. Murmurs followed him as he walked toward the elevator. By the time he entered the boardroom, the air was already thick with tension. 12 executives sat around the long glass table, their faces pale with surprise. The chairman, an older man named Frederick Lang, rose from his seat. "Grant," he said slowly, "we were not expecting you." Grant placed the envelope from the cabin on the table. "I know. I am not here to reclaim my position. I am here to tell the truth." He looked around the room, meeting every gaze. "The merger you pushed for would have cost thousands of workers their jobs. I refused because I believed this company was built for innovation, not exploitation. My father's vision was never about power. It was about integrity." Lang shifted uneasily. "You abandoned us, Grant. You walked away." "I walked away because you turned my father's dream into greed," he replied. "But I am not here to fight. I am here to end the lies. You will release a statement clearing my name and revealing the truth about why I left. And if you do not, I will." The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that swallows every heartbeat. Then slowly, Lang nodded. "You always were your father's son," he said quietly. Grant turned to leave, but Lang added, "The world will know you as Carter again." He stopped at the door. "No," he said firmly. "The world will know me as Davis." When he returned to the cabin that evening, the sun was setting over the lake. Claire was outside, standing near the water, her arms wrapped around herself. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "You went back, did you not?" He nodded. "I did." "And?" "They will tell the truth. Everything." "No." She studied him for a long moment, her expression softening. "You did it for your father." He shook his head. "I did it for you. Because you were right. I cannot hide behind silence anymore." Claire smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened. "So what happens now?" Grant stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "Now we see if something real can survive the truth." For the first time since the day they met, there was no storm between them, only quiet understanding. He reached for her hand, and she did not pull away. The world outside might still whisper, the cameras might still search, but for this one moment by the lake, there was peace. And in that fragile peace, Grant Davis began to believe that maybe redemption did not come from erasing the past, but from having the courage to live it honestly with the one person who saw the man behind the name. A week later, the news spread across every major channel. Carter Technologies confirms former heir acted with integrity. For the first time in years, Grant's name was not tied to scandal or mystery, but to truth. He watched the broadcast in silence from the cabin, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. Claire stood beside him, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "So what now?" she asked quietly. He turned to her. "Now I make things right." That afternoon, Grant drove them back to the city. Instead of hiding, he faced the cameras waiting outside the company headquarters. When reporters shouted questions, he did not dodge them. "I made mistakes," he said clearly. "But the people who supported me deserve honesty. That begins today." The crowd hushed. Claire watched from a distance, her heart tightening as she saw him reclaim the voice he once abandoned. There was no arrogance in his tone, only conviction. For the first time, the man who once ran from his name was standing tall beneath it. Later that evening, he took her to a quiet rooftop overlooking the city skyline. The wind was cool, the lights glittering below, like 1,000 tiny promises. He handed her a small box. Inside was the same silver ring he had bought the night they married, a simple band, now engraved with 2 words, "My truth." "I cannot change how we began," he said softly. "But I can choose how we continue. This time no lies, no contracts, no pretending. Only the truth, if you will have it." Claire looked at the ring, tears filling her eyes. "You really are impossible," she whispered. "Maybe," he said with a faint smile, "but I am yours, if you will still have me." She slipped the ring onto her finger, her voice trembling but sure. "Then let us start over. No secrets. No fear." Grant reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining as the city lights shimmered below them. For the first time since that stormy night outside the church, their marriage felt real, built not on impulse or illusion, but on truth, forgiveness, and a love that had finally earned its name. Spring came early that year. The air was warmer, the city brighter. And for the first time in a long while, both of them were living without fear. Grant had officially stepped away from Carter Technologies, donating most of his shares to establish a new foundation, one dedicated to rebuilding small businesses destroyed by corporate greed. He named it the Second Chance Fund. At the launch event, reporters asked if he regretted leaving the company that bore his family's name. Grant smiled. "A name is not what makes a legacy. Actions do." Claire watched him from the crowd, pride swelling quietly in her chest. She had seen him at his lowest, seen him confront his past, and now she was watching him build something entirely new, something honest. After the event, he found her waiting by the stage with that same calm smile that had disarmed her the very first night they met. "You looked like you belonged up there," she said softly. He shook his head. "I belong right here." They left the city together that evening and drove back to the small lake cabin where everything had fallen apart and come back together. The place was brighter now, windows fixed, the garden alive with wildflowers. Claire walked through the doorway and paused, noticing something new on the far wall. A framed photograph hung there. It showed their courthouse wedding, two strangers, drenched in rain, holding hands under a flickering streetlight. Beneath it was a small brass plaque engraved with the words, "Not a mistake, a beginning." Her breath caught. "You kept this?" "I did," he said, "because that night saved me." She turned to face him. "No, Grant, we saved each other." They sat together by the fireplace as dusk settled over the lake. The silence between them was comfortable now, filled with the kind of understanding that did not need words. "I used to think love was something that just happened," Claire said quietly. "But maybe it is something you choose, again and again, even after everything breaks." Grant reached for her hand. "Then I choose you, every day." She smiled, tears glistening but soft. "Then so do I." He rose, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. This time, no courthouse, no papers, just a promise. Inside was a new ring, gold, simple, shining in the firelight. He knelt down, not out of tradition, but out of devotion. "Claire Davis," he said, his voice steady. "Will you marry me, for real this time?" She laughed through her tears. "You are asking your wife to marry you again?" He smiled. "I am asking the woman who taught me how to live." She nodded, unable to speak, and let him slip the ring onto her finger. Outside, the last light of day reflected off the surface of the lake, turning it to gold. The sound of the wind through the trees mixed with their laughter. For two people who had met in the rain, lost themselves in lies, and found redemption in truth, this was the ending they had earned, quiet, imperfect, and deeply human. Grant wrapped his arms around her, his voice low against her ear. "You once said we had nothing left to lose," he whispered. "Now, I think we have everything to keep." And as the night settled over the lake, they stayed there, two souls who had walked through every kind of storm, finally home in the peace they built together. It was no longer a fake marriage. It was the truest thing either of them had ever known.